the Bluetooth demonstration for Lab 2. So right now we have the car, which is currently sitting on top of my PC because my range is pretty bad on the PC. I actually can't have it on the floor, but this should still be able to demonstrate everything just as well. So you can, this is just the power cable. So we go over to our code. We can go ahead and run our server, which is now listening on port 0. So this server is going to wait for certain replies like forward, backward, left, right, temperature, certain queries like that, or commands. Over here, we'll go ahead and run the client. What is your command to the Pi? So we can do let's do a forward command. I think there's enough space up here. Hopefully the car won't. Okay, so you can see that's forward. I'll go ahead and do left, though I think I'm going to pick it up because I don't trust that it won't fall. There you go. Turning left, etc. So you can see the directional commands are working. We can also query things like temperature to get the current CPU temperature. As you can see, that's not just like, these are actual temperatures. We can get like the current time from the Pi itself. So you can see that the Bluetooth connection is working as expected. So for part 1, the Bluetooth component of the lab, the two main pieces of code that we had to modify were btclient.py and btserver.py. So you can see here that btclient.py, really the only major change that we had to make was just making sure that our host was set to the correct Bluetooth address, the Bluetooth adapter. And on the server side, we had our inputs. What we chose to do is to accept them as strings. And then what we would do is we would take our data, convert it to a string, and then see, because it would come back as like just bytes encoded in UTF-8, right? So we convert that to a string and then check to see if forward is contained in that string of data, basically. And if so, then we would send the client the information that we're going to be moving forward, and then we called our myutils.forward, to move forward. Same thing, backward, left, right. We also decided to include temperature using the CPU temperature class, and also just the time as whatever the time the Pi thinks it is, just to show that we can communicate some data back and forth. Something simple, which required importing the utils folder or the utils file that we generated back in lab 1 that had a lot of the Pi controls, even though we only get a few of them, right? And then some imports for the date and time and for the CPU temperature on the Raspberry Pi. And that's the Bluetooth code. So here we have a demonstration of our Wi-Fi capabilities. So right now the car is plugged in. I have the monitor open so we can see everything a little bit more easily. We're going to come in over here, and on this is the Raspberry Pi. We're going to go ahead and run our Wi-Fi server, which is now on. And then over here, which is this is a Ubuntu running from my actual PC. I'm going to go ahead and run our npm electron program, which you can see here. You can see the GUI, and we're going to go ahead and try sending a message. We're going to go ahead and send temp, as that should update our temperature. And we can see the temperature, CPU temperature, has been returned as 50.147, and you can see we have some server responses coming back. And we can also demonstrate that given the car where it is, if we try instead sending a W command, which is the up arrow, that the car will move forward in response to that command. And you can see that we now have a return status from our server. Our Bluetooth return value is moving forward, which it did when we hit W. So this is the code explanation for the second part of the lab. So obviously a lot of this code was, sort of prefabricated and given to us. The main things that we had to change, so here in the Wi-Fi server.py, this is what's being run on the actual Raspberry Pi itself. You see that we have to go ahead and move this line out of the while loop like it was before. Obviously, we need to change the IP address, import our utilities that we're going to use to control the Pi, the car, and like get information from it. You can see here that we're doing something similar where we're converting the data into a string and checking to see if we match a certain substring, and if so, we're doing a client send all. In this case, we had to specify that we're sending bytes, which we didn't have to do over Bluetooth, which was interesting. Even down here in like the temperature and things like that, I had to convert, these response strings into bytes, byte literals, I believe they're called in Python. But these pretty much mimic the same thing as the Bluetooth side. You can see we have main. We've added the, the necessary line that was required. Index.js relies upon the send data function that one of my group members made. You can see that this is being used like when we have this update key, we're sending our data by calling this function. We made the little required changes here so that we could just say npm start. Made a little preload file. I don't think this was changed. I think maybe we use a different word here, like type instead of something else, but this is pretty much the same. Index.html, we have our, this is our actual like HTML file. You see that we have our little, arrow keys or buttons, etc. And that's, yeah, that's pretty much the code.